Getting on tonight's monthly equine webinar series with me, Grace, the extension assistant, equine extension assistant, and then tonight is our presenter with Land O'Lakes Purina, Haylee Lavoie. She'll be talking about how to manage with your horse through the winter, feeds, and what else. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, shoot them in the chat or ask at the very end when we will give some time for you guys to ask any questions. If you aren't able to get on tonight, please let me know, and we actually will record this and put it on our YouTube page for anyone that would like to see it or like to look back and see it. So I will hand this over to Haylee, and we can get started.
Great, thank you, Grace. So I guess just to get started, I will give you guys just a little bit of background about myself. We don't need to talk about myself or anything, but I am from Wyoming originally. I'm now living here in Texas. Some of you may know me. I worked for Dr. Anderson the last 2.5 years working on my master's there in Nebraska, and graduated last August, and then was lucky enough to get a job with Purina and moved here to Texas. So a lot of people ask is, what do you do? I mean, you work for Purina, we get that. What's an equine production specialist? And really my job is to travel from farms to ranches to large barns to help individuals out in the community, from having one horse to, large ranches and farms, and help them figure out the best nutritional value for their horses and diet plan. I deal with any type of breed. I deal with warm bloods, Friesians, quarter horses, all disciplines. I've definitely had some great experiences here in Texas of things I have never been around. I've been doing a lot of charros and dressage, these dancing horses, and I'm mostly a quarter horse girl, so it's been an adjustment, but super fun. So that's kind of a lot about my job. It changes day to day, and I couldn't ask for a better job. Now living here in Texas, we don't have a lot of winterizing our horses, but up there in Nebraska, and me being from Wyoming up north, it's a big subject we want to talk about with our horses and how we're going to take care of them when it comes to it. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. In the beginning, I may jump in kind of fast, but I'll slow down. There's just a few things I want to hit on, but I feel like you guys all kind of know. So to start off, like I said, it's really important for us to understand how to prepare our horses for the cold temperatures and understand, in addition, what our horses are capable of controlling themselves and regulate their own temperature. So to start off, I just wanted to throw a couple things out there of how they regulate their own temperature. So we kind of start off with the thyroid. A lot of horses, well, all horses, excuse me, their thyroid does increase the production of hormones, which increases their metabolism, resulting in heat production. As the days get shorter, this does start to increase. The next couple things you would think of are your arteries and sweat glands. Your arteries are going to regulate your blood flow, so exercise is good for them, and we'll get a little more specifically into exercising your winter horses. In addition, your sweat glands, so if they are exercised, it helps dry themselves. Starting to get more, also you would think of, but more of the control center, is your skin. So their horse's skin is used as an insulator, just like us. But an interesting thing about them is they do produce a greasy substance. And the whole point of this greasy substance is to reflect water, rain, snow, help with that cold and reflect that moisture, so that moisture doesn't get down to their skin to help protect them. Two other things that you would think of is their hair coat. They start growing, the days get shorter, so they start getting a heavy winter hair coat, which is ideal. That's what we want. That's just kind of their natural state. So, but one thing we talk about in their hair coat is called piloerectation. Sounds like a big word, but it's really simple. It's just the mechanism that moves individual hairs, and this regulates the airflow. So you can imagine in the winter, it's got those hairs really close together. It's fighting against that wind. It doesn't want to let a lot of air in. Or in the summer, it can open up. Also, in addition, their body condition score. Just like us, fat is used as an insulator. So we want to body condition our scores, our horses, body condition our horses less going in. That way they don't lose as much weight. So let's really focus on what is our job. And this is what's really important, kind of the whole point of this webinar. With that, first things you need to think of are proper feed, water, shelter, and exercise. We'll start off with feed, which is probably going to be the majority of this talk, so you can all imagine. With cold temperatures increasing, the amount of calories a horse needs to maintain body weight, produce heat, and support their reproductive system increases. With this, because it requires more energy to help maintain body temperature when the outside temperature drops. However, this is when we need additional feed to help them meet their requirements, maintain their body weight and condition. So how do we do that? How do we give them calories and let them to produce heat? Well, we've got hay and forage, or we have grain. Hay or forage can be used either. Some of us turn our horses out on pasture, and some of us have to feed them hay. It matters what you're doing with them. And then we have grain, which is going to increase our calories. This kind of leads me to a little bit of a different, not a different subject, but just kind of on a point, that feeding corn in the winter is a heating feed. I know many horse owners believe that when the weather is cold, horses need to be fed rations containing more corn or byproducts as a heating feed. However, corn and other cereal grains do not cause the horse to become warmer. They simply provide more energy, or we say calories per pound, which then allows the horse to maintain its body weight. This results in their weight gain, therefore more body fat, increased body condition scoring. And this is where the insulation comes in from their skin and that fat that may help them stay warmer. So with that, you can think of corn to provide more calories, or your grain to help their body condition score, to maybe use as an insulator, whereas it's not going to produce heat for the horse. So what else is difference between forage and grain? Like I was saying before, and maybe I just needed to sum this up a little bit, and so that's why I put this slide in, is that forage provides more warming effect internally as heat than, say, our starches and our grains. The reasoning why is the research we've done. Forage, as our horses eat it, they ferment it to digest it. And when they ferment forage or whatever pasture they're on, they produce heat. So your forage is going to produce your heat, and your grain is going to give you the extra calories. So when we're feeding during the cold weather, the difference of how much forage and grain changes. Starting off, we like to say our horses should eat 1 to 1.5% of their body weight in forage each day. It's kind of just a rule of thumb we go by. So you can, take your horse's body weight, we'll say he's 1,000 pounds, times it by 0.015, and you can figure out your horse needs 15 pounds of forage a day. Okay, so what does that mean does our horse need in the winter when he has an increase in calorie requirements, increase in energy, and needs to produce heat to stay warm? Well, we can increase that to 2%. You can go higher than that, up to 3%. And so that will give you kind of an idea. Now your horse needs at least 20 pounds of forage. However, a thing you have to remember, like you can see this horse on the side here, if you look at his forage, you can tell it's not high quality forage. He's not going to get a lot of nutrient value out of that. One thing we run into a problem in the winter is our hay's been sitting out, or it's aged a little bit, the weather's been on it, and it's going to decrease that nutrient value. So you have to make sure that you're going to feed them a good quality forage. Ideally, we like to eat them 24 hours. Ideally, we like them to eat forage 24 hours a day so they can keep fermenting that fiber and produce heat. This slide looks like a lot at first, but I'll kind of break it down for you guys. Although grain does not provide as much internal warming effect as hay, it is packed with calories and will be more efficient to support their body condition, which serves as an insulator in cold weather. But with these cold temperatures, one thing we like to ask is, what is too cold? What is the critical temperature for our horses? For our mature horses, with fleshy, they have a good winter hair coat, that critical temperature is going to be about 15 degrees. Now, say you have some younger horses, you got some thinner ones, you got some senior horses. What is their critical temperature? As you can see on this slide, they've come up with our research that 40 degrees. And I know in Nebraska and Wyoming, I mean, we don't get above 40 degrees for weeks at a time. So if you've got a younger, thinner horse, you really are going to have to feed them, supplement them with the forage and the energy or calories to get them through the winter, or they're going to lose a lot of body weight. And when they do that, they can have some other issues. So in addition, when you're feeding them in the cold weather, they burn 15 to 20% more calories for each 10 degrees below critical temperature. So at 15 degrees, our normal horse just hits critical temperature. We drop to 5 degrees and their calories need to increase by 15 to 20%. So this is when they're already eating as much forage as we can. For them to keep producing heat, we're going to start introducing grain. A lot of our non-working horses, we want to start just feeding them 1 pound to 2 pounds of grain a day. Our working horses, we can start increasing that 2 to 3 pounds of feed. Leaving this on a note, we're doing this again for their body condition scoring. And I'll briefly go over that a little bit, but we like to see them between a 5.5 and a 6.5. I sometimes don't mind seeing mine at the beginning of the winter, especially up north in Wyoming, hitting that almost 7 because they are going to lose some weight. So thinking of body condition scoring, so going into winter, how do you score your horse? And this is kind of a whole nother topic we could get into, but not for today. And I know there's an app that UNO has provided that you guys can download, and it can help you guys out to figure out your horse's body condition score. But one thing I want to point out is, do not mistake a hay belly for a horse that is fat or in good condition. There is a big difference. You need to evaluate where your horse actually deposits fat on its body to make sure you are correct in their body condition score. So just because I am with Purina, I know our products a lot better, or a lot through and through. And so I just kind of use them as a reference. There are a lot of other brand names out there that have similar products that would be great for your guys' horse. But if you're looking for suggestions of forage, you can't get a good quality hay, or you're having trouble of getting hay because your horses are turned out to pasture and the pasture's running low or the snow's covered. These are some options. We do have a lineup. A lot of people know about our equine senior feed. It's #1 veterinarian recommended, and it's such a great feed because it has forage built into it. But we've now expanded that into an equine adult and an equine junior feed. So if you're looking for some other options, if you're running low on forage, you can always pick up some of these at your local Purina dealer. Also, we're looking for calories. Now we're past forage and we need high-end calories. We need more calories to help that body condition score, have them put on some weight, or they're not, so they don't lose it. Some recommendations I might have just on our Purina side, there's other products out there. So our only 200 and 500, our Ultium lineup, which is kind of our high-end performance. And then we have our Strategy and our Strategy Healthy Edge. If you're looking for just a safe feed to feed your horses throughout the winter with high calories to keep weight on them, Strategy is definitely a go-to. It's It's probably our most popular feed, but it's just super safe to feed any type of horse, especially when they're all turned out together. Speaking of other feeding suggestions, you got some of your skinny horses and you need to put on a lot of weight really fast. We do have 2 supplements. One is our Amplify, and sometimes our Outlast helps if we're fighting against ulcers. But for the feed, rule of thumb is forage is going to produce more heat and your calories are going to come from your grain. So you really just gotta figure those out, figure out where your horse is. As soon as you give them all the forage they need, then you can go ahead and top them off with some grain. So the next thing, we talked about feed, and now I want to talk about water. Really important is that water should always be readily available for your horse. And snow is not a sufficient substance for water. A horse cannot physically eat enough snow to meet its water requirements. This is sometimes a myth that gets thrown around a little bit, but also that snow will bring down their temperature if they're drinking water that cold. So we want it to be between 45 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit. If their water is too cold, our horses will drink less, thereby decreasing hydration in the gut and increasing the risk of impaction colic. So as you can see, a little horse in my top corner, his water is kind of frozen and he's digging for it. He's not going to be real keen on drinking a lot of water if it's real cold. So that's kind of a concern we have to have, because then they're going to eat less or they're going to be dehydrated and we can have impaction colic. Also, drinking very cold water means that sorry, I just lost my train of thought, guys. Anyway, cold water, it increases their calorie requirements because they have to increase energy to warm up their digestive tract and the water inside helping them through that digestive tract. Moral of the story, provide clean, fresh water that is free of ice at all times. Use a safe warmer if necessary to thaw the water. Other note I should have put in here is if you're gonna have a water heater, great. But make sure you check it every day. I've seen them shorted before and you wanna make sure there's no electricity so they're not getting shocked when they drink. Kind of just another myth buster I like to put out there, we talk about a lot, is warm bran mash. Traditionally, many horse owners have prepared weekly or daily bran mashes for their horses during the winter months or during cold snaps. This idea kind of comes from that it helps keep their horses regular or reduce the risk of impaction colic. Actually, research shows that it doesn't support that the bran itself is not a laxative effect, but it's an increase in water that you're mixing with your bran mash that is responsible for the digestive benefit. A better way you could do this is if you take instead of doing a warm mash, you could take that out and put a nutritionally balanced diet in, and you could warm it up in hot water, and that's just going to give them some more water. So next we're going to talk about shelter a little bit. This one does feel a little drug out here in my presentation, but it's just something that's really important, and there's so many different options you can do. So the other consideration we want to think of is what type of housing or shelter are you going to do? If they're out in pasture, sometimes trees and bushes, an open-sided shed, or is just ideal for them. But sometimes we have a lot of our horses inside in a barn, so we need it heated. The days are shorter. They've got blankets on, so we need to keep them warm because their climate control is not working because they haven't been exposed. So how cold is it too cold outside? Like I said before, the horse's comfort zone is very different than the person's comfort zone. So if you think it's cold outside, it's not quite as cold for them, especially if they've been exposed to it. What we really want to think about is if it's wet or windy and what those type of conditions are for them. But luckily, a long, thick hair coat is an excellent insulator and is the horse's first line of defense against cold temperatures. Horses that live outdoors during the winter should be allowed to grow naturally full winter coats. This is going to be their best line of defense. This is how they naturally came up in our air, or came up in those colder states. However, if a horse's natural coat loses much of its insulation properties when it is wet, as I discussed, they produce that greasy substance that helps reflect that water. So if you're brushing them a lot, you're bathing them a lot, or you're blanketing them a lot, this gets rid of those effects. Also, when you blanket them, that piloerectation can't happen, and that's going to have a negative effect when you take the blanket off. So if you're going to keep your horses outside, either decide to blanket them or really not blanket them. And sometimes it's okay to blanket them when you really hit those cold snaps, but make sure you're just consistent with one way or the other. So you're not affecting the horse's natural state of how to regulate his own temperature. With our horses that live indoors, adequate blankets are necessary to ensure that they do not get too cold. Also, closed or in heated barns must be well ventilated, and so, sorry, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. We have to make sure they're well ventilated. If you're going to keep your horse inside, we'll have a lot of respiratory issues. You don't want to have that, have to call the vet out, and have any respiratory issues that could cause long-term damage. The other kind of quick tip with our horses that live inside, we just got to make sure to exercise them because they get boredom and they get vices. So with winter exercising, this is kind of our last little topic, exercising our winter horses. Many horses are given the winter off from work due to the cold. We lack time, or because we think it's like a break period from the heavy show season. However, if horses are left too long, they forget of what they have been taught and lose the condition that they gained over the year of work. So you're almost starting back at square one on their conditioning, going back into the show season or coming up into the spring. So to prevent the winter slump, there's kind of a couple things you can do. Lunging your horse once or twice a week. It not only gets the horses exercising, but it gives you an opportunity to clean their feet, check for injuries, those normal things you would do in the summer with your horses. If lunging isn't possible and you got two, ponying is always a great, is always a second best option. Get both horses working. Keep in mind, again, I like to say your horses are not in the same shape that they were during the summer. So we have to make sure that we don't quite work them that hard, just, walking, trotting, no loping, unless you are in a heated barn area. So other issues that can come with this and are exercising our winter horses, and precautions we must take are warming up and cooling down our horses. They can get stiff. Your horses will get frisky when you get on. If you get off too fast and you don't cool them down, they're going to get stiff. If you are going to work a horse hard, as we all know, make sure you cool out and dry your horse. Definitely. Two huge things we have problems with horses being worked in the winter is one, respiratory disease, like I was talking from shelters, or barns that aren't ventilated, having poor air quality, and it can cause long-term damage. Other thing is not cooling our horses off correctly. If we don't do that, then it could conclude in a horse tying up. So make sure you're working them a couple days but giving them some time off, watching their feed, how much grain you're giving them. The still nutritional rules are going to apply in the winter of feeding them too much grain versus exercise. So I feel like I sped through that really fast than I thought I would. But there are just kind of some other things I wanted to point out, just kind of as a take-home message of feeding our horses in the winter. Is first off that the horse's comfort zone is very different than a person's comfort zone. They are a lot more tolerant to colder weather. Other thing to think about is your good conditioned, your fleshy horse, critical temperature is about 15 degrees Fahrenheit. So once it hits that 15 degrees and starts going below, we'll want to make sure they got all the forage they can get, and we might start supplementing some more grain, 1 to 2 pounds, non-working, 2 to 4 are working horses. Just another thing is that brushing, bathing, and blanketing your horse does affect their natural regulation of temperature. So you kind of have to pick, are you keeping them inside or are you taking them outside? Another fact that we talked about that is a really good take-home message is hay before grain, which we say this even in the summer, all times of the year, but we're looking for heat production, hay before grain. Snow does not meet your horse's water requirements, so make sure you got warm water, about 45 degrees. You can have a water heater. Shelter, you can be inside or outside, but if you're inside, make sure it's well ventilated, and if you're outside, just make sure you have some type of shelter that they can get away from the wind and the snow. And lastly, just kind of refocusing back on the whole point of this presentation is what is our jobs? We've already discussed how well the horse can regulate its own temperature. So really our jobs are just to make sure we feed them, water them, give them shelter, and exercise. That good exercise, that way you don't get behind in your showing season too, and you can enjoy them as much as you can. That's kind of just what I had for you guys today. But if there are any questions, let me know. I know we're going to post this on the Facebook page, and if you guys want to put comments, I can come back and answer them later in another day or two after more people have viewed this little webinar. But if there are any questions now, I would love to take them. Are there any, Grace?
It does not look like it, but since we did put your email address on here, people will be able to send you questions since they weren't asked tonight. I'm going to pause the share.